Yo, what is up, my friends? Welcome back into the podcast. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. Guys, today I am finally back after a little bit of a hiatus. If y'all haven't noticed, I took quite some time off the podcast because I obviously moved and I did some other things in my life that required my attention. So at the end of the fantasy regular season last year, I took a little bit of a break, but it's good to be back. I'm going to start covering 2022 content with you guys. The main thing I wanted to go over today is the 2022 fantasy draft. I'm going to be giving you my rankings for the 2022 draft, and I'm going to go more and more in depth as the week goes along. But for now, I'm going to be giving you my top 25 players for the 2022 fantasy draft, so you kind of know who you're looking to take in the early rounds. And I am going to get right into it, guys. But real quick, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button below. And if you do enjoy my content today, make sure to give me a thumbs up, as likes help my channel tremendously. All right, guys, I'm going to dive right into my number one player, and that is Jonathan Taylor, guys. Jonathan Taylor was absolutely dominant for almost the entire season last year. I mean, he, started a little bit slow in the first 3 weeks, but, week 4 against the Dolphins, he went off, and then he really didn't look back after that. The dude was absolutely dominant from a PPR perspective. He's an awesome dual-threat running back. He's heavily involved in the passing game. He's a guy that's going to get 7 or 8 targets in most games, 20-plus carries. He's going to get a ton of touches. He's extremely efficient, and he is by far, even more so than Derrick Henry and other big play backs, the best big play back in all of football, because this dude on any given play can bust an 80-yard touchdown run, and it seemed to happen in most games last year more often than not. This dude had so many huge plays of 50 yards or more that it was almost ridiculous, and I really thought that he should be in the MVP conversation, but it's a quarterback award, as we know. Anyway, Jonathan Taylor was absolutely dominant last year, and he is going to be the easy number one pick in this coming draft. From a dynasty perspective, he's obviously the number one player you want to have on your team because of his talent and because of his youth. And in the 2022 draft, you're going to want to take Jonathan Taylor with your number one pick. There's absolutely no debate here. Next on my list is going to be Derrick Henry, guys. Derrick Henry is right up there with Jonathan Taylor with his ability to execute big plays. This dude is an absolute monster, and on any given play, he can bust a 75-yard touchdown run. This dude is extremely efficient. He's not as evolved as Jonathan Taylor is in the passing game. That's why I have Jonathan Taylor ahead of him, but he's the kind of guy that's going to get 28 to 30 carries a game. He gets insane workhorse volume. He's extremely efficient, and he is just really an unstoppable running back. This is one of the most talented running backs in the entire NFL. Some people would argue that he's the most talented running back in the NFL. This guy is very hard to stop, and on any given Sunday, he's probably going to give you a huge fantasy performance. So he's going to be the number 2. My number 3 is going to be Austin Ekeler. Guys, Austin Ekeler is an awesome dual-threat running back. This dude runs very strong for his size. Some people give him a bad rap because, he's not very big and everything like that, but this dude's a freak of nature. He does one-arm pull-ups. He's an absolute physical specimen. Don't let the fact that he's small deter you from wanting to draft Austin Ekeler in any given season. This dude also has tremendous touchdown upside due to being in a high-scoring Chargers offense and getting insane red zone volume. I mean, this dude gets a lot of high-value touches. He's heavily involved as a wide receiver, and he's not really the kind of running back that's going to give you 20-plus carries in a game, but he doesn't need it because he's going to get consistently around that 13 to 15 carry mark, and he's probably going to receive 8 to 10 targets a game. So this dude is a lock every week for 20 to 25 touches. A lot of those touches are red zone touches. So considering the fact that this dude scores touchdowns at an extremely high clip, you're going to want him on your team. I mean, he had some games last year where he scored 3 touchdowns. He had a game where he scored 4 touchdowns. This dude gets in the end zone like crazy, and we want players to score touchdowns. So draft Austin Ekeler. Next on my list is going to be Dalvin Cook. All right, guys, Dalvin Cook is one of the most dominant fantasy players when he's actually healthy and on the field. Now that we have, Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry, who are, more, they're better fantasy weapons than Dalvin Cook at this point. But over the past 5 years, when Dalvin Cook has actually been healthy and on the field, he's really been the best player you could possibly have in fantasy. The only issue has been, him staying healthy, and there's the injury concern and everything like that. But the good news is for Dalvin Cook, over the past 2 years, he's actually been healthy for the most part. He obviously missed some games last year, and then we saw Alexander Madison fill in. But he played most of the season last year and most of the season the year before that. These past 2 years, he only missed a few games in each season. So he's actually been more healthy than, he's been in the past. So, as long as this dude can continue to get out and be healthy and on the field, the Vikings insist on running their offense through Dalvin Cook, even though they have a plethora of passing weapons at Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. Dalvin Cook is an absolute workhorse. He's very efficient, and you're going to want him on your team. Next on my list, getting into the receivers, is going to be Cooper Kupp. Guys, Cooper Kupp just had a historic season. We saw him break all kinds of records, and he was just absolutely dominant from week one throughout the entire fantasy season, and he never slowed down. I mean, he never got hurt. He never missed any time whatsoever. This dude averaged a touchdown a game. He had a ton of 100-plus yard receiving games. This dude in the playoffs scored a touchdown in every single game, including the game winner in the Super Bowl. This dude was absolutely unstoppable this past year, and I don't see any reason why he's going to slow down. He obviously has a very good connection with Matt Stafford. Some people might think it's a little bit early to start putting wide receivers into my rankings, but Cooper Kupp is just that good, so I have him as my number 5. My next on my list is going to be Joe Mixon. Guys, Joe Mixon is a part of a very high-scoring Cincinnati Bengals offense. He's got the talent. He's going to get the workload. I mean, we know that this guy is going to get 18 to 22, 23 carries in most games for this high-scoring Bengals offense. Considering the fact that this team gets in the end zone like crazy, he has high touchdown upside, and he's a big, strong, durable running back. He gets injured every now and then, but, he was healthy for most of the season this past year. And when he was healthy and on the field, he was very good. So I'm taking Joe Mixon at my number 6. My number 7 is going to be Alvin Kamara. Guys, Alvin Kamara saw more rushing volume this past year than he did in his entire career. I mean, he's always been a very dominant fantasy running back due to his ability to be heavily involved in the passing game. But this past year, we saw Sean Payton actually feed him the rock and give him a lot of 20-plus carry games. So this dude is more heavily involved in the rushing game than he ever has. He's still very heavily involved in the passing game. And now that the Saints have sort of a dual threat thing going on with, Taysom Hill, and Taysom Hill's ability to run the football, it makes Alvin Kamara even more deadly because teams have the game plan to stop Taysom Hill and stop him from torching him for 100 yards, right? So Alvin Kamara is going to be even more of a deadly fantasy weapon now that there's kind of a dual threat, with the quarterback running the ball. So Alvin Kamara is a really good draft pick for this next year. Next on my list is going to be Najee Harris. Okay, guys, Najee Harris, we don't know who his quarterback's going to be next year. So, Big Ben retired. Who's going to be the quarterback? We don't know. But one thing that we do know is that he is going to get a ton of volume. I mean, we saw it this year. I mean, this dude was drafted to be a workhorse back. He has games where he gets over 10 targets. He had one game last year where he had 19 targets. I mean, they pass this guy the ball a lot, and he's an absolute lock every week for 20-plus carries. This dude is a candidate every week to get 30-plus touches. He very well might be the biggest volume hog running back in all of fantasy football next year. And anybody that gets that kind of volume, whether or not he's going to be on efficient offense or not, we want him on our fantasy team. So I'm drafting him. He is my number 8 on my rankings. Next on my list is going to be Javonte Williams. This is going to be higher than most experts are going to have Javonte Williams. Look, I believe in Javonte Williams. Melvin Gordon is a free agent this year. The Denver Broncos are probably going to get rid of Melvin Gordon because, Melvin Gordon wants to be the workhorse back, right? And as long as he's there with Javonte Williams, he's going to be splitting carries. I think that the Broncos are going to part ways with Melvin Gordon in this offseason. That's going to make Javonte Williams the lead workhorse back. We saw how good this dude was when he takes over the lead workhorse role, so I've got to have him as a top 10 player. Next on my list is going to be Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb was kind of on and off this past year, but this is still one of the most talented running backs in football. This is a run-first Browns offense, and they're going to give Nick Chubb a lot of volume. He's also a very talented back, as we know, and as long as he's healthy and on the field, I've got him as a top 10 player. Next on my list is going to be Christian McCaffrey. All right, guys, the only reason I don't have Christian McCaffrey higher is because the past 2 years he's been injured almost the entire season, so the injury concerns are becoming a serious problem for Christian McCaffrey. He is the new Dalvin Cook. He is the player that we want on our team, but we're scared to have on our team because we think he's going to get hurt and be out for the season. If I knew that he was going to be healthy all year, he would obviously be a lot higher in my rankings, but the past 2 years he missed almost the entire season. So we're just going to see how that goes. I would be careful drafting Christian McCaffrey because he seems to be extremely banged up at this point, and we just don't know if he's going to be healthy throughout the course of an entire season. All right, next on my list is going to be Jamar Chase. This is going to be the number 2 receiver off the board. This is one of the most dynamic players in all of fantasy football. He's got Joe Burrow, a very talented quarterback throwing the ball. And if he was this good in his rookie season, imagine how good he's going to be this next year. He's only going to get better and better as his career goes along. This guy is, to me, the easy number 2 off the board as far as wide receivers. Next after him is going to be Justin Jefferson. Look, we have a 2-year sample size with Justin Jefferson, guys. Justin Jefferson is one of the best receivers in this game. He's one of the best big play receivers in the entire NFL, and he's got a very good connection with Kirk Cousins. And not to mention, he has the Dalvin Cook effect. Look, if Dalvin Cook is on the field, that sets up awesome play action opportunities for Justin Jefferson to make big plays. And we've seen it over the past 2 years. This dude is going to be great for fantasy. And on a week-to-week basis, he's starting to get 8, 10, 11, 12 targets in these games. And he's the kind of receiver that he has such good big play ability. He only needs 5 or 6 targets a game to produce awesome fantasy numbers. And he's getting 8 to 12 targets in a lot of these games. This dude's going to be one of the best receivers in fantasy this year. So get your hands on Justin Jefferson if you have the chance. Next on my list is going to be Tyreek Hill. Guys, Tyreek Hill, kind of the same thing as Justin Jefferson. He's basically just a more well-built, faster version of Justin Jefferson. He's a great route runner. He has awesome big play ability. He's in an awesome Chiefs offense. I don't see any reason why Tyreek Hill won't have another great fantasy season. We know that he's a little bit boomer bust, which is strange to me considering the fact that his target share actually went up this past season, and he was starting to get 8 to 10 targets in a lot of these games. And this is the kind of dude that can win you a week single-handedly on any given week. So he has to go high in my in the fantasy drafts. Next on my list is going to be Deebo Samuel, dual threat. This dude lines up as a running back on a lot of plays. I'm not sure on the exact number, but I think he had somewhere around like 8 rushing touchdowns last year. That's absolutely crazy. This dude is one of the most interesting players in the entire NFL to watch. And I don't see any reason why he's not going to be dominant next season. As long as this dude is on the field and healthy and playing, he's a lock every season to score 12-plus touchdowns because they're going to line him up as a running back. They're going to give him red zone targets as a receiver. They're going to give him red zone carries. And so this dude's going to score a lot of touchdowns. We want players that score touchdowns in fantasy. He's also, a dynamic player that also has the ability to bust out huge plays and win you weeks single-handedly. So draft Deebo Samuel. He's my number 15. My number 16 is going to be Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson finished the season really strong, and that was good to see after all the injury concerns that he had early in the year. But as the season went along, he had a lot of games where he had 22, 23-plus carries. And so not only is he extremely talented, but he's getting the volume that we wanted him to get, and we saw that in the second half of the year. So he is way up there on my list of running backs. I think I have him at my running back 10. Either way, I have him at my 16 ranking overall. Antonio Gibson is a great player to draft next year. Next on my list is going to be Travis Kelce, first tight end off the board, like he is every year. This dude is one of the biggest difference-making players in all of fantasy football. If you can get awesome production from the tight end position, that can win you weeks. And Travis Kelce is the kind of guy who wins you weeks. There's not much to think about here. He is my number 17. My number 18 is going to be A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown is just an alpha male wide receiver. He's got the size. He's got the speed. And they insist on giving this guy the ball a lot. I thought that the target share between him and Julio Jones was going to be kind of similar last year, but it wasn't. A.J. Brown gets pretty much all the volume in this offense. And even with Derrick Henry back and healthy, I think that makes A.J. Brown even better, to be honest, because teams have the game plan to stop the run. And A.J. Brown's going to have huge games, whether Derrick Henry is healthy or not. And he's going to win you weeks, and he's going to win you leagues. So draft A.J. Brown. I have him at my number 18. My number 19 is going to be DeAndre Swift. This guy has emerged as one of the best dual threat running backs in football, right up there with Jonathan Taylor and Austin Eckler. This dude gets 10-plus targets in a lot of games. He's a lock every week for 25 touches due to him being a dual threat back. I mean, he's not really the guy who gets 20-plus carries in a lot of games. Most games last year, he had 13 to 15 carries and 8 to 10 targets. Either way, that's 25 touches, and in PPR leagues, you want pass-catching running backs. Pass-catching running backs are the most deadly weapon in fantasy football. He's my number 19. My number 20 is going to be Devontae Adams. A lot of people have Devontae Adams higher. I'm just too skeptical about the situation in Green Bay. I mean, I don't know who the quarterback's going to be. What's going to go on with Aaron Rodgers? What's going to go on with Devontae Adams? It remains to be seen. And until we figure out more in that regard, we can't have Devontae Adams too high in our rankings, but I'm going to move him up quickly once we know more about the situation in Green Bay. Number 21 is going to be Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews had one of the best tight end seasons we've seen in a long time. This dude is an absolutely awesome tight end. The Ravens offense runs through their tight ends. They prefer throwing to their tight ends, so draft Mark Andrews. 22 on my list is going to be David Montgomery. This is a very talented back. The question every year with Chicago is, how's the overall efficiency of the offense going to be? We just don't know. But the fact of the matter is David Montgomery is very talented, and he's going to get the volume, so he's in my top 25. 23 is Josh Allen. Pretty high. I don't really like ranking quarterbacks in my top 25, but we know how big of a difference-making player this dude is because he's got a rocket arm. He's got great speed. He's got the ability to score multiple rushing touchdowns in a game. He's in an extremely high-scoring offense, and the entire offense runs through Josh Allen. So he's my number 23. My number 24 is going to be Eli Mitchell. This dude is very talented, and we know that he's going to get the volume. Look, we don't really know what the quarterback situation is going to be in San Francisco next year, right? Is it going to be Jimmy Garoppolo? Is it going to be Trey Lance? That's obviously going to make a big difference in how efficient Eli Mitchell is, because with Trey Lance, Eli Mitchell is going to run the ball less. With Jimmy Garoppolo, Eli Mitchell is going to run the ball more. But I think that with either quarterback, he's going to be good for fantasy, definitely good enough to be a top 25 pick. Rounding out my top 25 is going to be CeeDee Lamb. He's the most heavily targeted receiver on the Cowboys. He's going to be going into his third season. And despite the Cowboys offense having their struggles in the second half of the season, it's still a very high-scoring offense. And CeeDee Lamb is the benefactor of being in that offense. So I'm going to draft him, high in next year's draft. He is 25 in my rankings. All right, guys, those are my top 25. Like I said, I'm going to go deeper later, but I wanted to start with my top 25 rankings so you know kind of who you're taking in the early rounds. So I hope this video helped, guys. It's going to be back on the podcast. I'm going to be getting at you, 3 or 4 times a week, if not more. And I hope this video helped, and I'll catch y'all later.